What's up, everybody? Today is Wednesday, July 22nd, and it's a splendid day for episode 43 of the Let's Catch Up podcast. I'm Waddy. I'm going to be your host and moderator tonight, and I'm going to be joined by Anthony, Rail, Trap, and She's Gotta Have It. How y'all all doing this evening?
Wow, thanks for asking.
Doing great.
It's splendid, man.
Wonderful, splendid.
Splendid. There you go. So we're all splendid.
But you like that one, right? You like that?
It was a little rough.
Whatever. All right, so tonight we're very excited because we have a very esteemed guest here tonight. We have educator Miss Jane Elliott on. How are you doing this evening, Miss Jane?
I'm doing just fine now. Let's go for it.
Awesome. You mind going ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
I'm the teacher who, when she was teaching third grade 52 years ago, the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, put her third grade all white, all Christian little children through an exercise in discrimination based on eye color in order to give them some idea how it feels to be treated unfairly based on a physical characteristic over which you have absolutely no control. And the physical characteristic is the color of their eyes, and the color of your eyes comes from the same chemical that the color of your skin does, melanin. And I let them find out how it feels to be something other than white in the United States of America. I did the blue-eyed people were on the bottom the first day, and the second day, on Monday, the brown-eyed people were on the bottom. And I observed changes in those children that explained to me why I am a racist, and it pointed out to me that I am a racist, and that they had learned a lot of their behaviors from people who look like me. And I've been doing it with people of all ages ever since April 5th of 1968. And now the problems are as bad now as they were then, because in reaction to a black man in the White House, 30% of the population of the United States insisted that we put an idiot in the White House. And that's what we have now.
Amen.
A women.
Well,
What do you say to that? That's it.
A woman. Well said. All right, so we're going to jump right into things here tonight because we do have a lot of ground to cover, and we want to get through everything with you. So I'm going to go ahead and get things started off with my question for you. And my question is going to be, is ending racism a feasible or a realistic expectation? What do you think?
It is an absolutely feasible, and absolutely we should be prepared to do it. And the reason we can do it is there's only one race on the face of the earth. And when you start talking about colorism, then the whole thing becomes absolutely ridiculous. There's only one race on the face of the earth. Every one of us, you males and females who are watching this, no matter what color you are my 30th to 50th cousins, because we are all descendants of those first modern human beings that evolved in sub-Saharan Africa between 300,000 and 500,000 years ago. There's only one race on the face of the earth, and so we can stop talking about racism and start talking about learned ignorance, which is what we are living with. We have learned a lie. And if you don't believe me, then you need to read Robert Wald Sussman's book, The Myth of Race, and you need to read it this week. You must not wait. You must read Robert Wald Sussman's book, The Myth of Race, this week, and then every person of every color in the United States of America should read The Rage of a Privileged Class by Ellis Coase. If you don't read all of it, just read this chapter that is called The Dozen Demons, the 12 things that black males go through every day in order to be accepted or even recognized and hired and seen as fully human in the United States of America. You've got to read this book because it's full of good information.
And you said it's called The Rage of a Privileged Class?
The Rage of a Privileged Class by Ellis
okay.
Coase. And if you haven't read it, oh my Lord, just here are some of the things that black males have to contend with every day. It's just fascinating. Inability to fit in, exclusion from the club, low expectations, shattered hopes, faint praise, presumption of failure, coping fatigue, pigeonholing, identity troubles, self-censorship and silence, mendacity, guilt by association, every one of these things, and I read them and I think, oh, my good Lord, I've seen that happen. I've heard that happen. I've seen people reacting in exactly those ways. This is ridiculous. If we know that it's happening and we keep on doing it, then That's the problem. We have to stop, and we have to stop now. We don't have the right to provide those problems, those demons for any human beings on the face of the earth. We have to put a stop to this, but we won't stop it until white folks who aren't really white. The first thing we have to do, of course, is teach people that there is no such thing as a white race. You can see the color of my sweatshirt. What color is it?
White.
White. And you can see where my skin stops and my sweatshirt begins. And what color is my skin?
Supposedly white.
Brownish.
No, not
tan.
even supposedly white. Can you see the color of my hair? My hair is white. Used to be gray. Now it's white. My skin never has been white, never will be white. I'm one of the hundreds of shades of brown on the face of the earth. Every person on the face of the earth has skin that is one of the shades of brown. And if you don't believe me, oh my God, you've got to get the National Geographic magazine for April of 2018. And I have it here, right here it is. Now look at this. You see these two young women here? You see these two children?
Yes.
They're twin sisters. Would you say that they are biracial?
Yes.
From the looks of things,
You
yes.
would? Well,
They-
which
well,
of them
well,
do
they-
you think came from outer space? Which of these had a parent that came from outer space?
None of them, Miss Jane.
None of them. So you see, there's only one race on the face of the earth. These two girls are not biracial. You can't be unless one of your parents came from another planet. These two girls are mosaic. Mosaic is an art form that is new and beautiful and made of many elements. And that's what these two girls are. They are not biracial. We've got to get rid of the idea of biracial since there's only one race. And if you think I'm lying about that, then you need to turn to this page in this National Geographic magazine and see this is where human beings started. And this is what they did. They moved from there over the thousands and thousands of years to populate every landmass on the face of the earth. Every person on the face of the earth is a descendant of those first modern human beings who were black. And they were black because they were exposed to tremendous amounts of sunlight near the equator in sub-Saharan Africa. They're exposed to tremendous amounts of sunlight, so their skin, their hair, and their eyes were very dark. It has nothing to do with being God's chosen children. It has to do with how their bodies adapted to the environment where they moved. And as they moved farther and farther from the equator, they're exposed to less and less sunlight, so their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. And that's the only reason that people in the Northern European countries have lighter skin, lighter hair, and lighter eyes. It's time to get over this nonsense and start teaching the truth. And here are 2 pages out of that National Geographic magazine. You see all these different people of different colors.
Yes, ma'am.
Are they all members of different races? No, they
No.
aren't. They're members of the same race, and you'll notice that none of them have skin this color because this is white. There are no white people on these pages. No matter how light their skin is, they are still on the color chart, on the Pantone color chart, because every one of us have some melanin in our skin, our hair, and our eyes. So it's time to stop talking about different races and start talking about the truth. And we
Right.
are all members of the same race. And if we trace our DNA back far enough, we will find that some percentage of every person's DNA on the face of the earth came from a country in Africa. Now, what was the question?
The next question is, what are the next steps that blacks can take to further the movement and like to getting to where you're saying? What can we feasibly do next?
You have to teach your children the truth. You have to make your children aware of how brilliant those black first modern human beings were to leave the area of the equator and populate every landmass on the face of the earth. And they did it without any modern technology. Do you realize how brilliant they were to do that? They knew nothing about geography. They knew nothing about science. They knew nothing about, except that 4,000 years ago, if you haven't read Anthony Browder's book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, you had better get it and read it today before you do anything else today. Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. And the author's name is Anthony Browder.
He has
And in
2
that
other
book,
books,
you'll
correct?
find- What?
He has 2 other books, correct? Anthony
Oh, I'm
Browder?
sure he has. I've only read that one, but you've got to read what he's written because it is so tremendously important. You might not realize that 4,000 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, blacks in the Nile Valley were doing cataract surgery with metal instrument before it was even heard of in Europe or Asia or anywhere else. You have to realize that they knew things that we never considered, that we modern, so-called modern human beings have never realized or never even considered assigning the credit for those things to black people. You know where Egypt is?
Yes.
Where?
It's
On what continent is Egypt?
it's like it's in between like Middle East and Africa, right? Like in that region.
It is the crown of Africa. It is the
Right.
northernmost point in Africa. It is a country on the continent of Africa. But we in this country have moved it into the Middle East so that we don't have to admit that all those wonderful things we got from those black people came from black people in Egypt. People in, see, I just get really angry about this because I know that we have been misinformed, miseducated, and indoctrinated instead of being educated. We have been taught to believe something that will make this country feel better, this country that we call America. And that makes me angry too, because you need to remember that, let me see now, America is everything from the northernmost point of Canada to the southernmost point of South America. Here's a map. The Americas are everything from here all the way down to here. These are the Americas. Every person in here is an American citizen, but we talk about America as if it's only the 48 contiguous states, Alaska, Hawaii, and the islands. People, all of these are Americans. You cannot build a wall along the southern border of the United States so that you can keep out Americans, because we are all Americans. This is ridiculous. And look at this map. This is another thing that makes me angry. You see this lovely map? You see Greenland hanging down here like a great big ripe plum?
Yes.
In practically every map of the world done by Mercator, this is the Mercator map, in practically every one of those maps, there is a legend at the bottom of the map. And the last sentence on that legend, it isn't on this map, but I have one on which it is. The last sentence on that map says, South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland.
Sheesh.
Now that's what it says on the map. But here is Greenland and here's South America. People, you have been grossly misled, and we're still using this map in schools throughout the United States. As far as I know, the only city that isn't using it is Boston, and Boston has put a different map in their schools. They are now using, because I was on the Oprah Winfrey show several years ago and showed them another map. Look at this. Here is a map on which the map is fair to all countries of the world. The shapes are distorted, but the sizes are right. See Greenland up here? And then see South America. You think this is an important difference?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
If
very
it wasn't an
advantageous.
important difference, yeah, if it wasn't an important difference, we'd have given this map up years ago, but this map does what we want it to do. It shows the superiority of the countries in which white people live. This has to be stopped. We have to stop indoctrinating students in the guise of education. This isn't education. This is determined ignorance. We are educating people to be ignorant.
So what can we do in our local communities to broker this change in our school systems and whatnot?
Get copies of this map and insist that the people who read the news on television in the evening use this map instead of the Mercator map. Go to the schools and insist that the students see this map instead of the Mercator map. Insist that we stop using the language of the 16th and 17th century to solve 21st century problems. We've got to stop referring to people as biracial or multiracial or members of a different race. We've got to stop talking about white people and talk about pale faces. The First Nations people, when we invaded this continent, called us pale faces because that's what we are, because they didn't realize that they too came from Africa. And if you see pictures of Native American chiefs and then compare them to pictures of black chiefs in Africa, you'll see that the similarities are absolutely undeniable. You have to realize that there are no white people unless we came from another planet. And we did not come from another planet because we have DNA that says part of our DNA came from a country in Africa. We have to start teaching the truth. You have to insist that teachers teach the truth instead of the lie. And in order to help you do that, you have to have some evidence, and you get the evidence by reading The Racial Conditioning of Our Children. And the subtitle is Stopping Psychological Genocide in the Schools. Because when you insist that your history, that the history we teach in the schools is all about all the things that white males have done, and very, very little, and until the 60s and 70s, nothing about the famous things that black males and females had done. When you teach a twisted history, as we have for the last 300 years in this country, you are extending the life of racism, and you are extending the life of ignorance. Parents, right now this is the ideal time with COVID-19 keeping your kids from going to school. Now you can sit those kids down in front of something and get out the books about how it really happened, and have those kids watch those film strips or those videos that Anthony Browder made. Have them watch those videos so that they go to school, and when some teacher, and I'm telling you it'll happen, and you know it'll happen, expects less of those little black boys than she does of the little white boys, those kids can say to the teacher, now wait a minute, fool. The only reason you're here well, let me tell you why I say things like that.
Miss Jane, then you're gonna get my little boy kicked out of school.
No,
Right, I was
no,
about to say that.
No,
So,
this will get your teacher.
Wait a minute, fool.
But, yeah, hey, if she's acting like a fool, he isn't going to say damn fool. He's just going to say fool. Because anybody who thinks that there's such a thing as a white person in this country is foolish, and that makes them a fool. Listen to what Frederick Douglass said. And how many years ago was that? He said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. Black children have the right to know how absolutely fantastic their forebears are. And we haven't told them that because we didn't know and we don't want to know. He also said, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. Where justice is denied, and that's happening in this country. Where poverty is enforced, that's happening in this country. Where ignorance prevails, that's happening in this country. And where any one class is made to feel that society is an organized conspiracy to oppress, rob, and degrade them, neither persons nor property will be safe. He was absolutely right. And those young people who are out in the streets protesting what is going on now, and our totally ridiculous leader is sending in federal troops to arrest them, we are on the verge of losing our democracy because of a person who has been indoctrinated with the myth of the rightness of whiteness. We have got to teach our children of all colors about the greatness of where we all came from. And we all came from somebody who looks like you. Didn't look like me. There was nobody who looked like me until people who looked like you moved farther and farther from the equator and lost the color in their skin, their hair, and their eyes. But as their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter, their brains did not get smaller. And it's time to stop teaching in ways that let black children, particularly black males, think they are less than. I want it stopped, and I want it stopped yesterday.
So I always hear that like, you know, especially when talking with, I don't know, I feel like race is a thing that is a created thing, and it is a tool, right? Like almost like our currency is a tool, but they created it for a reason, to use it as a tool. So when I say white, I mean, that's what I'm talking about. It's a tool created as white, not the fact that I see it as acceptable. But when I speak to the white contemporary or pale face, I don't know what the correct thing is now, but when I talk, when I
Call them melanin challenged. We are
Caucasian,
melanin challenged.
melanin challenge. When I talk to melanin challenged people,
Or if
they
you have
always
too little iron in your body, you have anemia. So we are melanemic. Pale faces are melanemic. We have too little melanin in our skin.
So when I talk to melanemic people, that feels weird, but whatever.
I'm writing that down. Melanemic.
They always respond to me about why aren't you happy? Slavery's over and we had a black president. Like what is enough? So my question, or the question that we have here, is what is the idyllic state, and not really for us, but for the people listening. Where should blacks stop and be happy enough? Like where's that line? Do you know where that line is? Or do you think you know
when you are treated as well as a pale face is treated, and when all your children are treated as well as pale face children are treated, and when your children are taught by teachers who aren't all pale face or melon challenged, when you have the same rights, and when you can walk down the street without some pale faced woman accusing you of trying to accost her or worse, when you have those rights, then we'll be all right. But you don't have them yet, and you won't have them until we change presidents, number one. That's going to help a lot, because we can see the many steps we had taken backward in the last 3.5 years. When Barack Obama got elected, we were making progress. Barack Obama got elected, and I thought, now I'll never have to do this work again. People are finally getting sensible, and I can relax. And like Whoopi Goldberg said, I can put my suitcase down now. I don't have to think about moving out of the country. And then, after 8 years of Mr. Obama trying to succeed and meeting the people in the Senate, headed by a real vicious almost human being, we have 30% of the population is absolutely determined that there will never be another black man in the White House. Well, there's one thing we could do to solve that problem: change the name of the White House to the president's residence. I remember when Richard Nixon said to a bunch of reporters, "I'm trying to save the White House for you white people." All right, let's fix that. Let's change the name of the building so that they don't have to worry about that anymore. It's time to get rid of that idea. And it's time to change the history books in this country so that they teach the truth instead of the lie. Columbus didn't discover America. You cannot discover a place where people are already living. They discovered it before you got there. All the wonderful inventions, all the creations, all the discoveries, according to the history books, were made by white males. That's a flat out lie. We need to stop teaching that lie. And none of those males were white. They were all just melanin challenged.
Melanemic.
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 Yes.
They were all melanemic. There are lots of melanemic people around, but you need to realize that melanemic people constitute only 25% of the population of the earth. 25% of the population of the earth are making the laws for everybody else. Now think about that. Don't think about that. It'll make you furious.
Did you happen to see the Nick Cannon comments or tobacco that happened, where he mentioned white people being more savage because they had to be in the Caucasus Mountains? Did you happen to see that? Any news about that?
But you see, if they had evolved in the Caucasus Mountains, they wouldn't have lived through the first winter. We have to get rid of the word Caucasian. That refers to people of Southern and Western Europe extraction. But they only were in Southern and Western Europe because black people moved from the equator into that area. And as they moved into that area, their bodies adapted to the natural environment, and their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. So they might as well give that idea up. Give up Caucasian, because it's another part, it's another way. We call it, the guy who wrote the book, The Myth of Race, did a really good job on the book, Robert Wald Sussman. Everybody has to read it. But the only problem is he gave it the wrong title. A myth is something that we make up to explain something that we don't understand in nature. The Greeks thought that the sun was a golden chariot carrying a god across the sky every morning. That was a myth. A myth is something we make up to explain something we don't understand. A lie, on the other hand, is something we make up to justify our unacceptable behaviors. And the idea of 3 or 4 different races is a deliberate lie made up during the Spanish Inquisition to give the people who Torquemada and company, who were running the Spanish Inquisition and trying to turn everybody Catholic, but they had killed a number of many people before they realized that a lot of the people they killed were Christians. And they realized then you can't tell what a person's religion is by looking at them. So they had to find another way to identify who deserved to die. So they set upon skin color. It has been that recent. Read the book, The Myth of Race, and you'll realize that we have been hornswoggled for long enough now. It's time for all of us to wake up, smell the coffee, and go to work destroying the lie of several different races. It is a lie. We must not live with it any longer.
So have you seen recently that Kanye West is trying to campaign for president, or apparently campaign? And did you see where he did you see where he mentioned that Harriot Tubman didn't actually free slaves?
Oh, well, you see, what Kanye West doesn't understand is we haven't stopped slavery. You think
I think that's what he was saying.
In this country? You look at the prison industrial complex. We take people off the street, not because they have committed a crime that should send them to prison, but because they've offended some pale-faced melanemic person. We put people in prisons, and the vast majority of those who are in prisons today are Black. We put them in prison. We force them to work 8 hours a day. We furnish their food, their lodging, and their clothing, and they work for 20 cents an hour in most cases. And the money that they make goes to the victim of their crime. And if these are victimless crimes, where does that money go? Now,
To the state?
communities, yeah, right. Communities are happy to have a prison come to their town because that will employ 300 people running that prison. Those people are in that prison who have been particularly during the Clinton years. Bill Clinton and his 3 strikes and you're out caused thousands of young Black males to go to prison, and they are still there. Now, if you think what happened there isn't racism, then look at what's happening now. About a month and a half, 2 months ago, our so-called president, who lives in the president's residence occasionally, released from prison and into house arrest 3 men who had pleaded guilty to ugly crimes: Flynn, Manafort, and Cohen. And now he has commuted the sentence of another man who admitted to having committed crimes. But all 4 of those guys are white. All those Black males, those young Black males who went in as a result of 3 strikes and you're out, are still there. When are their sentences going to be commuted? Furthermore, Mr. What's-his-name decided to let them out because he didn't want those white boys exposed to coronavirus in prison. So we let them out so they don't have to worry about that. What about those Black males who are still there? What about them? Is it all right to expose them to coronavirus? You see, the whole thing is about race. And my civil engineer brother said to me last week, "Jane, with you, every road leads to racism." I said, "Steve, you need to realize that in the United States of America, every facet of our living has something to do with racism. Racism is involved in the books we read, the highways we have, the schools that we're allowed to go to, the teachers we hire, the people who are going to vote in this next election. That is going to be decided by racism and racists." He thinks I'm way overboard. Well, okay, he's an older white male, and he doesn't have to worry about it. I have to worry about it. I have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who are coming into this situation, and I want them to come into a more realistic situation. This world, we have created a fantasy for white people and a tragedy for people of color, and I want it stopped.
Let me ask a question. Ms. Jane, you just mentioned that you have grandkids that are, for the next generation coming up, that you want them to have the right mindset. So what about the household that don't have a Miss Jane as a grandmother? What's the
I'll tell you what Black households have. They have Black women. And my heroes are black women. Make no mistake about this. If you are fortunate enough, and I'm not saying this because you're black, I say this to every, oh, you are black, aren't you? Maybe I'm wrong, but that's, you're okay.
Maybe.
My heroes,
It's a
I swear to you,
possibility.
my heroes are black women because they keep on keeping on no matter what you do to them. Now, we could arrange for those kids who come out of those households in which white women don't believe anything that I'm saying, could go to school and have the teacher say, on the first day of kindergarten, say, all right, boys and girls, here's a box of Crayola crayons. A whole group of different colors in this box. Take out the white crayon, and she'd show them the white crayon. Hold it up in front of them. Say, now, everybody hold this crayon against the back of your hand. How many of you have skin that matches that crayon? Not one kid is going to say, I do, Miss Smith. They're all going to say, it ain't white. She's going to say, the crayon is white. Your skin is not. Now, over there on the wall is something called the Pantone color wheel. Now, when you have time today, you go over and put your hand, the back of your hand up against, or your hand against that color wheel until you find the color of your skin. And every one of you will be able to find the color of your skin on that color wheel, because every person in this room is a shade of brown, either very, very dark brown or very, very light brown. That's the way it is, boys and girls. You can find your color, your skin color on that color wheel. And not one of them will find their skin color on the whiteness on that color wheel, on the edges of that color wheel, because none of them are going to be white. We've got to start wiping out the lie. At preschool, we ought to start prenatally. But I was contacted by a group of registered nurses in Los Angeles just about 6 months ago. They asked me if I would come and speak to them. And I said, look, I was delivered of 4 children in 5 years, and we found out what was causing that. I didn't do the delivering. I don't know anything about medicine. Why do you want me to speak to you? She said, that's not what we want to talk about. We want to talk about the fact that we, as registered nurses who have worked in delivery rooms, know that black and brown women don't get the same treatment in delivery rooms that white women do. She said, we want to deliver babies. We want to be the midwives that deliver babies so that every child gets the same good care when he or she is born. You shouldn't have to think about that. I, as a white person, never had to think about that. But black and brown women have to think about that. Native American women have to think about that. Navajo women today are watching their children and their husbands and their wives and their grandparents die in increased numbers because we, white folks, don't think about what's happening to the Navajo. They were only here several thousand years before we got here, about 10,000 years.
Did that get your answer, Ro?
She took it a whole other step later. So I'm like, yo, we just give it prepare for the next generation. I guess that's it, right? Just pray for the best for the generation coming after, because
No. Don't tell me you're going to pray about it. Don't tell me you're going to pray about it.
Do something.
Tell me you're going to pray about it. We have used prayer and religion and so-called Christianity in this country to keep people in their place for 300 years. It's time to stop doing that. If we don't have, I believe in prayer. I'm a Christian, a practicing Christian. I'm going to keep on practicing till I get it right. I don't have it right yet because the Bible says, judge not, that ye be not judged. But I judge people who say we're going to pray about on this as a little foolish, because how many of your mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers prayed that this nonsense would stop?
And it hasn't
Every
stopped.
single one of them. It hasn't stopped. God didn't put us here to pray, to tell him to solve these problems. God created a human that would walk on 2 legs, and what was the color of the dirt that he dug up out of the Garden of Eden to make him, and that was black, because it was made out of rotted palm fronds, and when vegetation rots, it turns very, very dark brown or black. So the first modern human being that came on this earth 500,000 years ago was black, and it says in the creation story that God created man out of dust in the Garden of Eden, and that was black. So the first man created by God obviously was black. People, it's time for us to say, let's start teaching the truth. My granddaughter just adopted, 3 years ago, adopted a gorgeous little half Spanish, half Hispanic child. He's absolutely beautiful. He's going to have to go to school, and he'd better go to school to somebody who says, you are a beautiful child. My grandson has married a black woman. She is gorgeous. Those children are going to have to go to school to somebody who had better not say, oh, you're biracial, aren't you? How nice that you're biracial. Or they're going to go to school. My two Saudi Arabian, half Saudi Arabian and half Anglo-American granddaughters are going to have gone to school and had the teacher stand up in front of the class and say, when I see people, I don't see people as black or brown or red or yellow. I just see people as people. And after they told me that had happened, I said, the next time somebody says that in front of you, you need to say to them, do you see white? You didn't say white there. Is it all right to see white people? We have to stop these racist comments being made. We have to stop saying things like biracial and multiracial, and we have to start talking about this situation in the 21st century with a 21st language. And that means no more white, because there are none. Several different shades of brown. Let's tell the truth.
I got you.
Can I leave with my question?
No.
Can I take the question? Can I ask my
What was
question?
your question? Sure.
So with that being said, I was asking, like, what do we do with the older folks? So how vital is it for the, was it the melanemic?
Melanin challenge.
Melanin challenge male to step up and help the situation? How much do you need? Do they need to step up and help us in the situation, or is it not necessary?
It's absolutely, it's essential that they step up and take over the situation, because we now have proof. We have absolute proof that Melanesic people aren't doing it well. If we knew what we were doing, if we knew how to do it well, we wouldn't have this problem today. If we weren't willing to remain ignorant, we wouldn't have racism in this country today, because we're all smart enough to realize that, wait just a minute here. Look at them, look at our similarities and look at our differences. And do you really want to judge somebody by the amount of a chemical in their skin? Now, white folks are going to start to say, you shouldn't judge me by the lack of melanin in my skin. But it has been all right for 400 years to judge people of color by the presence of melanin in their skin. You see, here's what's going to happen. And I know this is going to happen. Within 30 years, the demographics of this country say that white people will be a numerical minority in the United States of America. Mm-hmm. And when I speak on a college campus, invariably, some white liberal female says, if they get power, aren't they going to want to treat us the way we treated them? Aren't they going to want to get even? And I say, wait a minute, let's find out. And I did this at the University of Houston a year or so ago. Angela Davis and I were on the program, and she did her thing, and she's brilliant. And then they asked me a question. I said, well, first, before I say anything else, let me do something. And there were about 1,500 people in that room. I said, well, every person in this room who considers himself or herself a member of the human race, please stand. They all stood up. I said, there it is, people. You're all members of the same race. Different color groups, different genders, different sexual orientation, different ages, different heights, different weights, but you're all members of the same race. And since you are, that means that you all had the same ancestor back there between 300,000 and 500 years ago, 500,000 years ago. Therefore, you are all 30th to 50th cousins. So now, turn to the person on your right, stick out your hand and say, hello, cousin. Every one of those students and teachers did it. They stuck out their hand, they said, hello, cousin, and then they started to laugh and visit with one another as if they had made a discovery. And then I said, okay, that's one thing. Now, anybody have a question? And this woman down in the front row said, if those people, and I knew who she was talking about, if those people get power, aren't they going to want to get even with us? I said, you're afraid that black people are going to get even with you, right? Yes. And I said, well, let's see if they are. Well, every person in this room who considers himself or herself a member of the black race and who wants to get even with all white folks, please stand. 3 young black males stood, and the rest of them just turned and looked at him like, are you crazy? And I said, see, they don't want to get even with all of us.
We just want you to leave us alone.
You can relax. And she was quite happy about that. But I said, now, let's be honest about this. Well, every black person in this room who would like to get even with one or two white people, please stand. They all leaped to their feet, shouting and laughing and applauding and high-fiving one another, tickled to death. I said, there it is. They don't want to get even with all of us, but every one of them wants to get even with one or two people who look like you and me. Now, if you want to be treated fairly in the future, all you have to do is be sure that you behave in such a way that you aren't one of the one or two they want to get even with. Do you understand that? And she said, yes, but she wasn't comfortable anymore because now she's going to have to change her mindset. And if she doesn't change her mindset, she is going to have to change her behaviors. I don't care what people think about me. I do care how you treat me. And if you're treating me badly because of your ignorance about skin color, you better know that I will come after you. And if you're doing it to one of my cousins, I will come after you because that kind of nonsense has to stop. It's against my religion.
So what is the best method in to help, like that white men can offer to help the cause or be good allies to people suffering?
Wait a minute. Do not depend on white people to be your good allies, because then you are depending on them again. You invite them, if they want to learn, to come to you and learn what this whole thing is about. But you're not going to invite them to assist you in learning. You already know more than most white people by virtue of the fact that you got through high school and you didn't leave because you couldn't stand any more of it. I'm assuming that you did. You've already shown that you know more than a whole lot of palefaces do. So instead of asking them to be allies, invite them to get prepared for the next 30 to 50 years in this country. And the only way you can be prepared for the next 30 to 50 years in this country is to learn the truth about race and about the human race. And to help them do that, you have them read Nathan Rutstein's book, The Racial Conditioning of Our Children. You have them read Ellis Cose's book and you discuss it with them. Have meetings at which you discuss those two books. Then be sure that every white person, no matter what their age, reads this book. Any white person can understand the color of man. This is an all black and white pictures in this book, and it's all about how we got our color, where our color came from, and what it means, which is simply that we all evolved and we all adjusted to the environment in different areas. You have to get this book. You have to, adult white people have to read that book so that they'll know what they need to teach their children. Then you go to my website, and on my website is a set of printed learning materials. The first page is a page of typical statements that white folks make that think they aren't racist. How many of you have had some white person say to you, when I see you, I don't see you black? Now, anybody who says to you, when I see you, I don't see you black, you need to say, if you didn't see me black, I don't think you'd say black. I think you'd say, when I see you, I don't see you orange, and you'd be right about that. You don't have to take that kind of what we are calling now, what's the word we use? Anyway, it's something we are unconscious bias. When people say, when I see you, I don't see you black, that isn't unconscious bias. That's conscious bias. They have to make the attempt to pretend to you that your skin color doesn't bother them. I learned not to do that the first time I worked with Linda Guillory for a company in the western part of the United States, black as can be and absolutely aggressive and knew what she was doing. And I said to her and the other black women who were introducing me to my job, I said, your skin color doesn't bother me. And they said, they looked at each other and laughed and said, doesn't bother us either. And I said, oh my God, I did it, didn't I? And they said, yes, you did. But we're going to teach you what not to say, Jane. So ever since, I have never forgotten that, and I never will. When somebody says to a person of color, when I see you, I don't see you black, you need to realize that what they are saying is, I am uncomfortable with your unfortunate skin discoloration. I'm just going to pretend you don't have that problem in order for me to get along with you. I'll never forget the woman who stood up in a major university, the southern part of the United States, and said, under the skin, we're all the same. I said, you believe that? Yes, I just look for the person's heart. I said, can you see my heart from where you're sitting? Well, because if you can, you should go down to the local hospital and volunteer to be their x-ray machine. You can save them a lot of money. She said, you know what I mean? I said, I know exactly what you mean. You mean you don't want to see a person's color because you can't relate to people of a different color. So you pretend that you're looking for my heart. In case you didn't know it, my heart is probably as black as it can be because of the things I've been doing for the last 48 years. I had a good heart once, but I don't have it anymore because I'm really angry. And when somebody like you stands up and makes that statement in a group like this, in which there are lots of people of different colors, it makes me really, really angry. You have no right to say to somebody, I just look for the person's heart, or we should ignore differences. Similarities are more important than differences. No, differences are extremely important. I like men. I enjoy women, but I like men. Now, those differences are important to me. So I'm not crazy about young ones, you understand, but if I can find an old one my age, I like men. If these differences are extremely important, stop pretending they don't matter because they matter greatly.
Avoidance.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Well, yeah, kind of my thought process was more so like, when me and Rel and we kind of were working on we're getting a nonprofit together. So one of the things that we mentioned was access and opportunities for people. And one of those things is you often have to work with, melanemic white men. And you find yourself in this weird position of saying, hey, can you please give me some money, or can you please donate to help the cause or whatever? And, we find ourselves in these positions to need access and some access to wealth and opportunities to like for example, we live in Frederick, Maryland, and Rel is responsible for bringing one of the first hip hop artists to this Weinberg Center in Frederick. But there was a whole lot of politicking that had to go on to allow the access for Nicole Barnes to get into that and perform hip hop. The whole city was against hip hop being performed. Not even, he's not a artist that cusses or anything like that. But they had to politic to get that okay. Like
you have to do the kinds of things. You have to do the kinds of things that Killer Mike does. Killer Mike has went out to the gangs in California and said, instead of having all these problems, you want to make some money, start a new cola. So they started Crip Cola, I think, and then the other one was Blood. Yeah, and the Bloods had another cola. And they
what was that called? Trigger Warning?
What?
What was the show called? Trigger Warning? It was Trigger Warning, right?
Well, I don't remember that, but he said, we've got it. If you want to have black people employed, employ them. Yeah. Instead of having gangs, have people working to make money for the black community. And that's what he did. He has, 8 or 9 barbershops in Atlanta, because he knows that eventually he's not going to be doing this work as an artist. He needs a way to make money. So he's employing black people in black barbershops. I've been in his black barbershops. It's like, oh my God, and then talk to T.I. Harris, Tip Harris. Talk to T.I. Harris. Ask him the best way to solve the problem that you're talking about. Don't ask a old white woman how to do that. Tip Harris knows how to do it. Tip Harris knows how to do it. I've met Tip Harris. I think, oh my God, I wish you were here.
Can you forward the email address? Can you forward our email address to T.I. so we can talk to him to get out?
No, you just call him and tell him you talk to me, or you send him this, and he'll probably call you and say, "Are you out of your mind? That woman is a nutcase." And if he does, you let me know.
Do you have his number so I can call him?
Oh, my daughter has his number, but
send it to me in an email. Send it to me.
I don't give out his number unless he asks me to.
Okay,
but
all right.
I just think those two men have proven that you can make it, and you can shake it, and you can make them take it. And that's what they have been doing for a number of years. Tip Harris and Killer Mike Render are just two of the most intelligent and most delightful people I have ever met. And I sat and listened to Killer Mike Render, and one of his friends discuss the situation that's going on in this country one night at dinner, and his wife was there. And I thought, listen to the brilliance that is here that we haven't taken advantage of. And that's exactly the way I feel about T.I. Harris. The brain power that that man has and the experience that he has is just phenomenal, in that we have decided not to pay any attention to it. And we listen to some of these folks who don't know what they're talking about because they've never been where those two men have been.
Well, at least mention to them next time you talk to them about our podcast and that we're looking for all the help. And that'd be fine.
Shout out.
I'll call my daughter and tell her to let them know about what's the name of this podcast. Let's Catch Up podcast. All right, I'll tell my daughter to call both of them and tell them to talk.
And say we're just looking for help. We're just looking for help and ways to expand.
But you need to look for help from people who understand where you're coming from and who realize what they have to do to get this to happen. Do not ask pale faces for that help, because the chances are pretty good that you aren't going to get it, because melanemic people take care of their own.
I think we created a word here tonight, Miss Jane. Melanemic. I think it's gonna stick.
Hey,
I think she's been created.
Hey, there's nothing ugly about it. It's a simple truth. We lack melanin in our bodies, so we are melanemic. That's a scientific statement, right? Sure. Absolutely. It is. Well, it's a new kind. This is the science for the 21st century. We've got to move into the 21st century, and that means moving away from the vocabulary where race is concerned of the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
DJ, do you have any questions for Miss Jane?
Nah, she kind of answered all my questions. So my only question was like, so if we all come from somewhere or someone, where is it or what is it? But I think she already answered that for me.
It was black people in sub-Saharan Africa between 300,000 and 500,000 years ago. And if you read the book, The Myth of Race by Robert Wald Sussman, you will know as much as I do about that, except I read a lot of books and that's only one of them. But you have to read Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization to realize how absolutely brilliant your forebears were. And how brilliant all our forebears were, but we melanemic people deny that they are our forebears. We are willing to give up all the fantastic ability, the curiosity, the creativity, the courage that they had in order to call ourselves Caucasian, which didn't exist. I talked to a Japanese woman several months ago at my daughter's house in California, and I said, we are all members of the same race. Your people came from the same place that my people came from. She said, no, they didn't. She said, no, we originated in Japan. I said, no, you didn't. You originated in Africa. But here's what you do. You go home and this week, get your DNA traced back as far as you can. I got a letter from her a week later and it said, Miss Elliott, I thank you for what you told me. I traced my DNA and I found out that my family members, my family roots, the roots of my family, were some of the first African Asians in Japan. Ta-da!
Nice.
She was black before she was what we call yellow. And Native Americans were black before what we call red. And Caucasians were black before they were white, because we all come from the same modern human beings who evolved in sub-Saharan Africa. And I'll repeat that every 5 minutes probably for the rest of my life, or until somebody shoots me, which I have been.
We ain't allowing that to happen.
Times.
No.
Yeah.
Tamika, she's got to have it. Do you have any specific question for Miss Jane?
I don't, Miss Jane. It's been a pleasure. I don't have any questions. I thank you for acknowledging Black women, and just some of the things you said were just so on point. And I'm grateful for just the opportunity. So thank you.
But listen to me. Don't thank me for telling the truth. I'm a Christian, and in the Bible it said that Jesus had feet of bronze and kinky woolly hair. Jesus didn't look like me and my father and my grandfather. You need to know that. We have used religion, Christianity in this country, to keep Black people down long enough. It's time for us to start telling the truth.
Gentlemen, have I not said that before?
Yeah, all the time.
Many times.
That's because she's a Black woman and she knows. She knows. You need to listen to her.
Oh boy. We're in trouble now.
Do not pump her head up, Miss Jane. It can't get much bigger.
And we're gonna hear it as soon as we get done with this. All right,
we're gonna have to hear it.
We are coming toward the end here, so got about 5-10 minutes left. I want to give everybody one last thought. So let's start with Rail. Got anything to say?
Before you give everybody one last thought, I want to introduce you to this book, A Collar in My Pocket. I wrote it. A Collar in My Pocket. It's not brilliant, but there are things in this book, questions and answers in this book, and descriptions of what white males go through, adult white males, when I put them through for half an hour, what we put black people through for a lifetime. You have to read how they react to half an hour or an hour and a half of being treated unfairly because of a physical characteristic over which they have no control. I've been hit by a white male during that exercise. I've had a knife pulled on me. I've been threatened with death numerous times. You need to realize that white males cannot stand for an hour and a half what we expect black people to put up with for a lifetime, which says to me that in our heart of hearts, we know that there's something in the black population that we have lost, that we who are melanemic have lost, and we're envious of it, and we're scared to death that they're going to get even with us eventually. We have to admit that, in fact, we understand that black people are stronger than melanemic people. Look what they've put up with, and look what they're still doing in spite of it.
I honestly believe that to go with that is that black people have been stripped of almost everything but the truth. They had to deal with the truth and handle it when they were here, and they've learned how to deal with it, and that's where you get that's when you find your soul. That's why they call us soul, because we were able to find our soul, and then you get the blues, and then you get jazz, and then you get all these things because we've learned how to connect back to our soul. But when you get into greed and other things, you lose sight of who you are and all these other facades that you create, like the lies that you just said. Those are lies that you created, and you allow yourself to connect.
It's also where we got our numeration system and our language, our alphabet. It's where we got our music. It's where we got our law. It's where we got our government. It's where we got all these things that we say came from Egypt, and Egypt is a country in Africa. Let's start to realize how fantastic black people have been over the centuries, 10,000 years in the North American continent alone. 10,000 years.
Amen.
All right, so I want to go ahead and give another final thought.
Well, I just like to say it's a pleasure to actually speak to Miss Jane, because I've been watching her for years, doing the studies and taking on the pale faces that think that they know or that think that they're not racist and shoving it down their throats. And it's just a pleasure that, just to have someone that can articulate it and let them know, like, you are a racist that look like them, that, that can say, well, why? No, this is why, and hand it back to them in so many different forms. Like you said, you've been threatened. So it's just a pleasure to just be able to speak to you today.
I appreciate that, and thank you for saying it. But do not forget the fact that I came from black, and I'll return to black, and I had both my husband and my son's bodies cremated when they died a couple of years ago, and their ashes were all gray. And so will mine be, and so will yours be. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Come on, people. We all started out the same color, and we're all going to end up the same color. I'm not in any hurry to have it happen, but we need to realize that.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Trap Healthy, you got any final thoughts?
Nah, I just appreciate being here. I just appreciate it. It's a lot to take on for my next day. So I appreciate it.
That's awesome. Anthony?
Don't you ever let anybody define you. You define yourself. Do not let any other person on the face of the earth define you. You know what you are, and you haven't the right to allow some melanemic person to define you. You know what you are. You be what you are.
Awesome. Anthony, final thoughts?
All right, I saved this for my section. Miss Jane, this is my grandmother, beautiful woman. She was also Iowa resident. She was born in Kilcutt, Iowa. I was born in Des Moines, Iowa. I just felt like that was amazing. So I don't know, what part of Iowa are you from?
Northeast Iowa, where it's really cold. We're 7 miles from the Minnesota border.
Okay, so you're up in, okay, I got you. Yeah, so I was born in Des Moines, My mom was born in Fort Madison. My grandmother in Kilcook. And yeah, it's just. Are you Hawkeyes or Cyclones?
Oh, well, I have both because I have nieces who graduated from the University of Iowa, and then I have brothers who graduated from, and grandchildren who graduated from Iowa State. So my alliance is split between them. But
Okay.
but now someday maybe I could become a Washington, no longer Redskin.
I'm talking about the Washington football team.
But I think you should go with Ravens instead.
No.
Thank you. None of them want to recognize me. I found out how it was like to be socially. What are we doing? Practicing socially distanced the day after I did the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise in my classroom. I have been socially distanced for the last 52 years.
Sheesh.
Miss Jane, I just want to say I really
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on. I learned a lot from you here today. Myth of the rightness of the whiteness. That's great.
Yep,
Myth of
that's
the
right.
color of
Did I say
We
it wrong?
teach the rightness of whiteness, which is a big
Rightness of
mistake.
whiteness.
And the
Yes.
next time somebody indicates to you that white people are smarter than everybody else, then you have to say to them, now wait a minute. If dark skin color makes you less intelligent, then in the summer, whites get dumber.
Good point. That's a drop the mic moment right there.
All right,
Yes,
do I go first or does
Anthony, you got some questions for her?
all right, from the Red Table Talk, since my last name is Red, I've said it Red's Table Talk there. So all right, so I got 3 questions for you, and you just got to answer the first thing that comes to your mind. What are you most sensitive to?
Racism.
Racism. Okay. All right. What is the hardest truth that you've had to face this past year?
That my husband and son will never come back. And I can quit talking to them because it's not going to happen. And that I believe in that other dimension, but they're gone. And I've got to stop thinking I'll see them again.
All right, you're going to make me cry.
Right.
Dang it.
I'm sorry, but you asked me a question, you get an honest
I
answer.
totally understand. I'm with you. I'm with you. Oh, man, I think we all tear up.
I'm gonna turn my camera off.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I don't want to.
No.
ruin the mood here,
It's
but you
beautiful. It's beautiful.
asked me what's the hardest thing I've had to do in the last year and a half. And that's
I
the hardest
feel you.
thing I've had to do. You can put off mourning just so long, and then you have to say, okay, this is the way it is. What are you going to do, Jane? And now I have to stop thinking of maybe and realize that never.
I understand.
What's the next question?
What's something we should all celebrate together, collectively, as human beings?
And the race.
Human being human beings. We should all celebrate that together, being human beings and knowing that we all came from the same ancestors. We're all 30th to 50th cousins. Let's get over this nonsense.
Absolutely.
Great.
And
That's
I'll
great.
toss to Waddy.
All right, so we got our motivational quote of the week. It comes from Mr. MLK Jr., Martin Luther King. I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. And that's all I got. Miss Jane,
that's the one thing I disagree with him about. Because we have done ugly things to people of color for 400 years in this country and said, we're doing this because we love you. I don't want a loving society. I want a just society. I'd like to say to everyone, we're going to make a decision here. You can either have a just society or a loving society, and we're going to make this choice. If I give you love, you might not get justice. If I give you justice, you might not get love. Now, would you vote to be given justice or love?
I vote for justice.
I vote for justice.
I would too. I would too. I would too.
I can do
And we
without
have
your
used
love.
That's
I
right.
love-
That's right. You can, and you've had to.
Fair.
Black
I love
people
a cat.
Black people have survived without the love of a whole mess of people, but they have fought for justice, and that's what Martin Luther King Jr. was fighting for. If we loved Martin Luther King Jr., he'd still be alive. But we
Exactly.
couldn't love him as long as he and Malcolm X were going to upset the apple cart here. So the two of them had to die, and they did. You know that, and I know that, and that was not a loving behavior. My father used to give us all a whip and line up the five of us and whip us one after another. And my mother would say, he's doing this because he loves you. And I'd think, could you love me a little less?
Absolutely.
If what we do to people of color is loving, then by the gods of war, I want justice.
You know what else is I think akin to that is how we say how we love pets, but we capture them and keep them in cages. Like, how could you truly love an animal and want to see it caged and bound to your house or not be free?
And put it to sleep when it gets old.
Right.
We put them to sleep when they get old. Yeah.
That's kind of asinine to me.
Well, we'll see. We have overused the word love. I love chocolate pudding with vanilla ice cream on it. But that doesn't have anything to do with the way I felt about my husband, the way I feel about my 3 remaining children, or the way I felt about my son who died 2 years ago. No, oh my God. I'd give up vanilla pudding with brownie pudding with vanilla ice cream on it in a minute if I could have the love of my husband. So let's not confuse love with what we're really all about in this country. We don't love one another. We don't even tolerate one another, except to use the word tolerate to mean put up with. Dick Cheney said when they asked him how he felt about his daughter being homosexual, I can tolerate homosexuals. My father never said that he could tolerate his children. Nor would I say that I could tolerate mine. If you use the proper meaning of tolerate, which means recognize, accept, and appreciate, value and appreciate, that's one thing. But that isn't what Dick Cheney was saying, and that's not what people say when I can tolerate. But I have had white people say to me, I can tolerate black people, and then I explode. And then they don't use that word anymore. Okay?
All right.
That's all I got. I do want to thank our fans, our listeners, our supporters. Also, reminder to everyone that the Let's Catch Out cookout is August 16th, a Sunday. Miss Jane, if you happen to be in the DC area on August 16th, mid-August, feel free to stop by. There goes your invite. And that's all I got here tonight.
Make sure you go to let'scatchuppodcast.com. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're on everywhere that you can find podcasts. And again, Miss Jane, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
Love it. We love it. Peace sign. Miss Jane, do you have a peace sign?
Can you give him a peace sign?
I don't know what you mean, but I take it.
Awesome. All right.
That's great.
Thank you, Ms. Jane.
All right.
Thank you, Miss Jane.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Miss Jane. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I appreciate you.
No problem.
I know.
It's the Legion.
Leave a motivation. Scrolling through the page. Strongly motivated. No, I won't leave you out there. Community driven. Can't stay to myself. Pay so often. They driven. Podcast built on